Ow!
Hey, Jort here, with a SINNOH starter type switch sequel. In the previous video we switched around the starters' type clockwise. Go watch it if you haven't already, or if you need to
jog your memory a little,
since it's been 3 months. First, let's answer Shalakkor's question. Will the secondary types remain unchanged? No. I mulled over this for a decent amount of time, and I think the most interesting option, the one with the most design potential, is switching the secondary types around counterclockwise. I'll go over this in more detail at the end of the video, but for now, it's time to cook. We're making a fighting cactus Pokemon, so you know I had to use Togemon as a reference. I loved this guy back in the 90s, when Digimon still had any cultural relevance. This does put the design in the realm of clichés, especially since I ended up giving Prinplup a sombrero, but some clichés exist for a reason. Speaking of a sombrero, Prinplup's core design is the same as Piplup. It's a penguin with a really big hat. I wanted to experiment with its shape to evoke the feeling of as many different types of cactus species as I can in this evolutionary line. It didn't feel tight enough thematically, so I ended up ditching the Raja feel I mentioned when I designed Piplup. The original evolutionary line has this overarching theme of royalty, of course, but while I was designing this I vaguely got the sense that Prinplup looks like an orchestra conductor. I rolled with this idea and tried to make my Prinplup and later Empoleon look like mariachi band members. Part of that was replacing the very obvious boxing gloves with maracas, moving away a little from Togemon's design. The shape of Prinplup's flippers is something I'm still not really convinced about. Jasko thinks they should be flat, like the original design, or like a cactus branch, while I'm more inclined to make them round. I do have a tendency to make everything a bit too muscular though, so I'm not sure.
¿Quieres?
Prinpoke, the drifter Pokemon. The arms of Prinpoke grow to delicious, hard-shelled fruit, but any Pokemon that wants a bite often gets beaten to a pulp by the prickly pugilist. Each swing of its fists rattles the seeds within the shell, a sound that causes all but the most stalwart Pokemon to flee. Prinpokes are solitary, seeking out worthy fights as it wanders the land, especially over sources of water, but it will gladly share with other Pokemon it deems not to be a threat. This earns them the reputation of being waterhole guardians, and it is not uncommon to find them followed by bands of thirsty Pokemon.
Platinum was one of the last Pokemon games I ever played, but it's probably the one I played the most. I'm bringing this up because Turtwig was my favorite Mon for a really long time, and I guess because he's the first gym leader, Roark and Turtwig are inseparably linked to each other in my mind now. Together with the Fire-Steel typing, it made the decision to base the evolutionary line around the idea of metalworking and construction pretty obvious. At first I really wanted to double down on the magma aspect, since
you should comment on the video now!
I knew I want to evoke the feeling of a forge, so I replaced the bushes on its back with 2 streams of molten flame. I couldn't get the shape to look quite right though, so I ended up replacing it with Kulava's butt flames. I changed the shape of Grotle's shell just a little bit to make it more angular and hopefully be more reminiscent of construction beams. The weird segment lines on Grotle's body were a great way to emphasize the builder helmet look, and another place I could add the dark trim color from Turtwig's shell, so I turned them into straps. I changed the shape of Grotle's shoes to look more melty and made its claws more angular and sharp. Finally, the flashlight on top of its head is lifted straight from Roark's design. I ended up being very conservative with the shape design. It works fine, I think, but if I revisit this in the future, I'll switch it up a lot. Maybe make the flames or the tongue a lot bigger. I think the redesign's tight, decently executed, but it's just not exciting, and ultimately my goal with these videos is to make drawings that are interesting and different, not just functional.
Worktle, the construction Pokemon. As Worktle feeds on the soil, it leaves sprawling tunnels behind it that become home to many other Pokemon. It is extremely meticulous in the construction of these tunnels, and they are known to be as stable as any man-made creation. Worktle uses its tongue to sculpt the magma it regurgitates into various complex structures, but requires a steady diet of rare minerals to maintain them. If deprived of these for extended periods of time, the entire tunnel ecosystem it creates can collapse.
Monferno's design process perfectly encapsulates everything that went through my mind with the series. The constant clash between my wish to maintain design clarity, keeping the Pokemon's core identity intact, and going crazy with shapes, making something new. Honestly, I'm not happy with how it turned out. There's potential here, but I don't have the technical skill to bring it out yet. The pose's stiff silhouette isn't that interesting, but at least I'm more or less satisfied with the colors. Monferno's design is basically a direct continuation of what I did with Chimchar, except he has a mud color now to show that he's a ground type. While working on him, it very quickly became clear that the Atlantis vibe I was going for looks too much like a ghost type, especially considering Golurk already exists. I really had to double down on the dripping mud look, and in theory I wanted the pose to convey this sense of lethargy, like he's almost melting into the ground. The fin at the end of his tail serves the same purpose it did in Chimchar's design, serving as a substitute for the flame, while the bubbles on the back of its head are supposed to be the foreign design element, like Piplup's cactus hat and Turtwig's tongue. I also made its nose and brow blockier to show they're carved out of clay. Lastly, I turned the hair tuft on its head into Golurk's Greek helmeted crest to show that it's sort of ancient.
That's what the mask is!
Monceano, the Warden Pokemon. This Pokemon's clay mask is hardened enough for it to be able to venture long distances without needing to maintain it, which allows them to organize into pack hunters, following a rigid pecking order. When the moon is full, Monceano will fight for dominance by headbutting each other repeatedly in an attempt to break the other's mask, with the winner collecting the broken scraps and the unfortunate loser cast out and forced to live away from the pack's nest. Long-standing alphas have been seen with elaborate headdresses fashioned from the countless broken masks of their opponents, a grim reminder to why they are on top.
And that's today's episode done. Before we wrap things up, as promised, I'll go over why I chose to switch with secondary types the way I did. Here's how I see it. If I only switch with primary types, it's almost like I'm limiting myself to just a recolor. On the other hand, if I switched with secondary types clockwise, I would basically be making the starters cosplay each other. It's definitely an interesting idea, but I feel like at that point the video series becomes what if we switched the starter animals around, rather than just the types. Switching the types counterclockwise gives me the best raw material to work with. This way I had the best shot at making something completely new. Don't get me wrong, I could make the other options work, but it'd be an uphill battle, and I just can't be bothered to do that. Congratulations, you've made it to the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, etc, etc. And if you have any ideas of your own of what I should draw next, feel free to comment down below. Bye bye.